Hi everyone, I'm super excited to be back with another episode of Health and Nutrition. Today I want to start with a very important question. Should you be eating one mango or any fruit for that matter every single day? The answer is not as straightforward as you might think, and it's both a yes and a no. It really depends upon a lot of factors, most important being how your body deals with a very important sugar which is present in most fruits, that's called fructose. In today's video, we'll explore the surprising relationship between three F's, that is fruits, fructose, and fatty liver. You heard that right. Yes, even if you're eating fruits which have natural sugars, that can still lead to obesity and accumulation of fat in your liver and lead to fatty liver if you're not careful. But don't worry, I'll also show you some fruits which are safe to eat, some which should definitely be avoided, and how do you get a good balance between health and harm. Stick around till the end to get some actionable and evidence-based tips that you can start using today. Welcome to Health and Nutrition with Sabyasachi. Alright, we are dealing with fructose today, which is the main sugar or a monosaccharide sugar in fruits. It's the one which makes anything taste sweet. Glucose really is not that sweet, but fructose is much sweeter. So it's sweet, but is it dangerous? A lot of people love mangoes, especially in India where a lot of different kinds of mangoes grow. So the real question that we're asking today is, should I eat one fruit a day? And I keep getting asked pretty often, can diabetics eat a mango a day? And what will it do to my blood sugars? Will it get uncontrolled? And should I therefore eat it every day, half every day? Should I juice it? There are so many questions that pop up in our mind. So let's try and find answers to some of these. I had sent a poll to all of my subscribers on YouTube, as well as on the WhatsApp group that we have, which has about 88 members so far, and overall I got about 200 responses. The question that I asked, that one question that I really asked was, and what's actually the video about is, are you eating mangoes this summer? The questions were, yes, I eat at least one fruit every day, or I eat both fruit and juice every day, that is amrus, and I have it but not every day, and I avoid mangoes, right? These were the four questions. And if you see, the poll has been taken by people with exceedingly high health-seeking behaviors, right? So people who are subscribed to my channel are the ones who really want to get fit and, want to do exercise and eat well. And therefore, you're seeing that about 55% said that they don't eat mangoes every day, and I am one of them, right? And about 35% said that they eat at least one fruit every day. Right, so this is the mango season, and perhaps you're talking about mangoes, but in general, that is what it was. But if you extrapolate this to the rest of the country, do you think these results would stand? I really doubt it. That's because majority of the country would say, okay, I have at least one mango every day, and so I would expect that number to bump up from 35% to at least 70%. Right, so then are these people doing the right thing? And is it okay to have mangoes or a fruit a day, or maybe more than one fruit every day, right? So, we're basically trying to seek answers to this, but I just thought I'll, give you a quick perspective on the, on what the poll said, and some of you might have participated in that poll as well. So what we are really talking about today is going to be, revolving around fructose. Before we deep dive into the science of fructose and how it can be beneficial or cause damage to the body, I would want to sort of make an appeal to all of you, and something that would really help me make better videos is if I see more and more of you subscribing. So far I see about 7 to 8% of you who are watching this video subscribing. So if you haven't subscribed so far, I really request you to encourage me and facilitate my making more videos on some of these important topics. And I would also like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to all the members of the Health and Nutrition with Sabyasachi WhatsApp group. There are about 88 members so far, and the link is in the description below. And if you feel like you can actually be part of this group, I brainstorm ideas and discuss a lot with members of the group before I actually make videos. So it will be a first-hand experience of a lot of good things, and there are a lot of very well-informed people on the group who could also help you even on a personal basis. So make sure you join that WhatsApp group. Let's get back to the subject at hand, that is fructose, and what it is. So let's understand a little bit about fructose and then see what it does in your body. So this is the chemical formula for fructose. As you can see, it's very similar to glucose, and the biochemical formula is the same for both, that is C6H12O6. Right? So these are both called monosaccharides. So these are single moieties or single sugars. And these are relatively quickly absorbed from your gut. So fructose and glucose are pretty similar to each other. However, fructose is predominantly present in things that taste sweet, right? So fructose is also called fruit sugar, and it's found in mangoes, in bananas, in juices, in honey, and in many other things that we'll see. Some of the villains I haven't named straight away, but then you'll see what other things that produce a lot of fructose. And like I said, it tastes sweeter than glucose but behaves relatively differently. Now, what happens if you join the two together? If you join one molecule of fructose and one molecule of glucose, what you actually get is called sucrose. Now, sucrose is a disaccharide, right? Disaccharide is two molecules, so it's 50% fructose and 50% glucose. So if you are consuming one molecule of sucrose, you will get equal parts of fructose and glucose. So let's hold on to this because we are going to use it as we go ahead. So this is essentially what are monosaccharides, what are disaccharides, and then there are something called polysaccharides, which are complex carbohydrates, right? And we'll talk about them in some future videos. What happens to fructose when you consume it? From the gut, it's going to be absorbed and taken directly to the liver through the portal circulation. There's a particular vein which connects the intestines to the liver, right? So fructose is not going to go into entire circulation and circulate through the body. It is going to be first taken to the liver, and then liver decides the fate of the fructose that you've consumed. So basic differences between glucose and fructose. And first and foremost is glucose is not much sweet to taste, fructose is sweet to taste. On top of this, the major differences are that glucose also gets quickly absorbed, but it goes directly into circulation and it goes to every cell of your body, whereas fructose goes only to the liver. And that's the very important reason why glucose will trigger insulin responses, but fructose on itself will not trigger any insulin response. Right? That's because fructose is not at all going in directly into circulation, right? So another very important difference is that glucose can be used by every cell of your body, including brain cells, muscle cells, to your eyes and to all other organs of the body. Every cell can use it, but fructose cannot be used by any cell of the body, right? And the storage form of glucose is called glycogen, and the storage form of fructose is called fat, right? That's where we'll see how it can turn bad. Once we understand these differences and that fructose directly goes into the liver, let's see the fate of that fructose. So what does the liver do with the fructose? Essentially, fructose does what alcohol does to your liver, but without the hangover. And this is a famous statement by Dr. Benjamin Bickman, and I'm a very big fan of his, and you can actually follow his videos on YouTube as well, right? So, like I said, because that fat angle is coming in, and that, alcohol can cause cirrhosis. Similarly, a lot of fructose can also cause, bad things. What does the liver decide to do with the fructose? This is a quick chart which, without going into too much jargon, once liver gets fructose, it converts it into one molecule called fructose 1-phosphate. So it adds one phosphate group taken from ATP, right? And then fructose 1-phosphate is then converted into something called dihydroxyacetone phosphate. That's called DHAP, right? Now this dihydroxyacetone phosphate, which is a form of fructose, has two fates. It can go into gluconeogenesis, that is making of glucose, or it could go into triglyceride formation, right? So this is sort of the most important thing to understand here. And, so which direction does it go into? Does DHAP go into glucose production or does it go into triglycerides? So how does the liver decide it, right? So it's all based on your insulin status. If you are insulin sensitive, so this is the pendulum which actually moves and it's not static, right? So if you are insulin sensitive, And if you are not aware of what insulin sensitivity and resistance means, you can watch some of my previous videos where I have discussed extensively about insulin resistance. And you can actually measure your fasting serum insulin levels and your fasting blood glucose levels, and then use them to calculate something called the HOMA-IR ratio, or the homeostatic insulin resistance ratio. If that ratio is less than 1, that means you're insulin sensitive. That means you're doing very well. If it's more than 1, that means there is some element of insulin resistance, right? So if you're insulin sensitive, then fructose, that means your insulin levels are already low, your blood glucose levels are low, and therefore fructose will be diverted towards making glucose by the liver, right? So this is what happens. So if you're insulin sensitive, your fructose will get converted into glucose, right? And so that is in your insulin sensitive state. However, if you're insulin resistant, that means your serum insulin levels are high and your blood sugar is already on the higher side. You don't need more glucose at all, right? And therefore, so what will happen is, if you're insulin resistant, that glucose starts get converted into triglycerides, which are nothing but lipids or fats, right? So it really depends upon your insulin resistance status. And this is the ball of fire. What happens to these triglycerides once the liver starts accumulating all this fat, right? So this is the pathway which explains to you how eating a lot of fruits which are rich in fructose can lead to increase in your triglyceride levels, which are actually seen in your lipid profile reports, right? All of you must have seen that. So what happens with these triglycerides? What does the liver do with these triglycerides? They are also important, so we are at this stage, right? So where triglycerides are being formed, liver starts disposing them into the bloodstream. So triglycerides combine with ApoB100 molecules, which are proteins, and that leads to formation of VLDL, or very low density lipoproteins, which are then converted into intermediate and then into low density lipoproteins. Low density lipoproteins are the ones which are atherogenic, right? So they are the ones which actually accumulate into blood vessels, lead to constriction of the blood vessels, reduction in blood flow, as you can see in this background, and so LDL is the bad cholesterol that we know about, right? And we'll talk a lot more about different types of LDL in the next episode. But for now, triglycerides will lead to increase in VLDL, LDL, which are all atherogenic, right? And so if again this is getting saturated, that is, the body already has a lot of LDL and VLDL, and that is predominantly determined by how much ApoB levels are there. If the ApoB levels are normal, it is not going to be able to carry too much of triglycerides, right? So triglycerides bind with ApoB and lead to all this. So once the ApoB is saturated, the liver can't export the glucose out into the bloodstream. So the liver starts accumulating glucose within itself, and that leads to something called NAFLD, or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So this is where fatty liver starts forming, right? Also, this LDL can be carried back by HDL, that is high density lipoproteins, and another protein called ApoA1, and the combination of this is actually transporting all this LDL back to the liver, right? So the liver is basically accumulating more and more of triglycerides and fat, and it's getting fatty, right? Also, fatty acids in other tissues, if they are also saturated because of too much of glucose consumption, will lead to more fatty acids in circulation, which will all be taken by the liver. So liver is really the depot where all the fatty acids are getting accumulated, right? So what really happens is fatty liver, right? So this is an animation which shows this is fatty liver, then it initially is normal, then fatty liver, then there is steatosis, then there is cirrhosis, and finally you could be landing up into liver cancer as well, right? So all of this goes through stages. I've explained this more in detail in the next slide, where it goes, the fatty liver fate goes through these stages, right? As we know, in the beginning, a normal liver will get converted into a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's when there is fat accumulation. However, the liver is still functioning normally. The liver enzymes called SGOT and SGPT, which you can see in your liver function tests, are within normal range. Usually you will have no symptoms, right? So initially, if the liver is not normal, it will still be reversible at this stage. That's because there is no dysfunction. However, if steps are not taken, the next stage goes to something called NASH. NASH is non-alcoholic steatohepatosis, right? That's when liver enzymes start becoming abnormal. So the liver starts losing its function, right? And therefore the liver enzymes are elevated. SGOT and especially SGPT is a good indicator that your liver is not functioning really well. Even at this stage, most people will have no symptoms, or you would have some amount of fatigue. But remember, this is steatohepatosis means there is a stagnation of all these triglycerides. It's getting excreted in your bile, and they are getting accumulated in your gallbladder, and that can lead to gallbladder stones, right? So NASH is can be accompanied by something called gallbladder stones, right? So this is also slightly reversible if you take steps and do the right things. But if not, then the liver starts becoming more and more dysfunctional and starts scarring, right? So if you keep getting an injury in your hand over and over again, you're sure to form a mark on that area, right? So that's a scar formation. Similarly, if the liver is getting insulted over and over again with too much of triglycerides, remember, a lot of this is coming from the fruit that we eat, right? So can lead to cirrhosis. Cirrhosis means your liver enzymes will be far elevated. It will lead to swelling of, it's all failing, right? So swelling of the stomach, it's called ascites. There will be jaundice, there will be blood vomiting, and this is most likely not reversible unless there is a liver transplantation, and majority of people with cirrhosis will perish. Once we understand the relationship of fructose with fatty liver, let's now also understand another very important relationship, that of fructose with uric acid levels. Right, I see elevated uric acid in a lot of patients, and most people are told to not eat proteins, or are told to restrict a lot of their diet to reduce their uric acid levels. Unfortunately, all of this is happening because of consumption of fruits, right? So let's understand how this happens. This is a flowchart that we've already seen before. Here I want you to concentrate only on that first step where fructose is converted to fructose 1-phosphate. That means fructose is getting a phosphate. How does this happen is by an enzyme called fructokinase, which actually utilizes a lot of ATP. Fructokinase is not regulated, and as much fructose comes in, that much of fructokinase is used by the liver to convert it into fructose 1-phosphate, and then downstream into DAP and into triglycerides. But remember that fructokinase uses a lot of ATP. So there is a lot of ATP. ATP is the energy currency of the body. Low ATP means, feeling low, feeling fatigue, and not being able to do, a lot of activities, not being energetic, right? So, consuming fructose, you might feel that it's a sugar, and, burning sugar gives me more energy. Unfortunately, consuming fructose depletes you of energy. There is a lot of rapid ATP use. So ATP then gets converted into something called AMP, or adenosine monophosphate, and then that gets converted into uric acid. So as you will realize that fructose into fructose 1-phosphate also has a side arm which increases uric acid levels and depletes your ATP stores. Right? So there are some implications for long distance running. So there are so many marathons which are happening now, and Tata Mumbai Marathon and the Navy Marathon, some of them that I participated in the last few months. So all of them offer sweet electrolytes at stations which are about 1.5-2 kilometers apart. Right. So what do these sweet electrolytes have? So this is one commonly used sweet electrolyte which is also offered at the Tata Mumbai Marathon. If you see, what makes this sweet is fructose. There is 640 milligram of fructose in this. Right? So if you take so much fructose, and remember, we are going to take not just once, right? You're going to take it over and over again during a 21 or a 42 kilometer run. So that means there's a lot of fructose overloading. And that, remember, will lead to ATP reduction. So you will feel a bit of crashing after you have a drink like this, right? So any instant electrolytes which are heavy in fructose are perhaps not the best thing. So fructose depletes ATP. It robs you of energy. It doesn't give you energy, right? Another one which is commonly used is called enerzal, right? So again, if you see enerzal, the ingredients, it has sucrose and glucose, right? So all of these are depleting you of energy, right? So imagine having this during a marathon over and over again, those, either those sachets or those Tetra Paks. So taking enerzal or any of these while your glucose depleted, that is during a long run, increases fatigue, leads to ATP loss, and increases uric acid levels to boot. So it really is the wrong fuel for the wrong moment, right? So race organizers need to understand that offering, fasten up reload or Enerzal is not the answer. But then, we definitely do need electrolytes when we're running. Not the fructose or the glucose or the sucrose, but we need electrolytes, which is sodium, potassium, calcium, and all of those, right? So, so what you can do is you can actually take something called Fasten Up Zero, right? This is zero sugar. This does not have any sucrose or fructose or glucose. Or you could also take something called Enerzal Zero, right? So all of these are, really helpful in replenishing your replenishing your electrolytes, but not depleting you of ATP. So once we understand what fructose is doing inside your body, let's understand what are the foods that have high fructose levels and that we should be avoiding, right? So high fructose foods, I'm sure a lot of you will identify with some of these, but I'll just enumerate some of them. First and foremost are sugar sweetened beverages, right? So soft drinks like colas, all your Coke and Pepsi, even fruit juices, some of them say they are 100% natural, but they are sweet because of addition of fructose. Flavored milk drinks, right, those strawberry and those chocolate milk drinks, which you think are good for your kids, it's not really that good, right? So energy drinks, I've already shown you examples. Packaged cold coffee, iced tea, all of these are sweet, and that's because predominantly they have fructose. And these often have high fructose corn syrup. And this is the biggest villain that I did not mention in the beginning. So high fructose corn syrup or even sucrose are the bad ones, which are making these exceedingly sweet. The others are processed snacks, like chips and namkeens that we are, very routinely consuming. So these have sugar or flavor enhancers, right? So like sucrose, granola bars, protein bars. Some of us are quite, including myself, actually was very fond of eating protein bars. But after this research, I'm not at all in favor of protein bars. Biscuits, cookies, crackers, cereal-based snacks, kurkures, munch, all of these. So even salty snacks use fructose-containing sugars for texture and for preservation, right? So it's ubiquitous. It's pretty much there everywhere. Bakeries and desserts, anything which is sweet, like cakes, pastries, muffins, glazed donuts, croissants, all your ice creams, frozen desserts, almost all of them are sweet because of fructose. So they use something called invert sugars or corn syrup or sometimes sucrose. All of them are definitely going to give you fructose overload. And remember that pathway where all of that is going to get into triglycerides, right? So can you imagine that eating all of these will increase your triglyceride levels? We don't associate eating sweet things with triglyceride levels. We associate them with diabetes or high glucose levels or sugar levels, but not triglycerides. But unfortunately, this is true. Breakfast cereals and health foods, so-called health foods, right? So cornflakes, chocos, sweetened oats, fruit-flavored yogurts. Nowadays, that's quite a fad, right? A lot of people want to eat Greek yogurt, which is fruit-flavored. Remember, all of them are sweet because of fructose additions. So remember that, it's like a caveat, not always true, is no added sugar products, which are actually sweet, they often contain fructose, sometimes corn syrup. So these spike both glucose and fructose. And they all of these load you early in the morning. Sauces and condiments, right? So like ketchup, you have 25% sugar in ketchup. So the tomato ketchup that you have from Maggi is very high in fructose. Though you might feel it's not sweet, but it has fructose. Barbecue sauce, teriyaki sauce, mustard, honey mustard, sweet chili. It's like a lot of these are present in the Subway sandwiches, right? But then, adding all those sauces is making it not really that healthy, right? So light or low fat dressings, all of them have fructose. So many sauces hide these high fructose corn syrups or sweeteners. They give them stability, but they actually are hiding it from you. And lastly, we say natural sweeteners like honey. It has 40% fructose. Like agave syrup or like date syrup, jaggery, molasses. I hear people having green tea with honey, or you have tea with jaggery. People say, I'll have good chai. I'll not have sugar chai, right? That is actually equally bad or even worse, right, than having a little bit of sugar. So honey, iced tea or anything with jaggery or that is good is not healthy. Right? So these are not safe in large amounts for insulin resistant individuals especially. right? So how do you spot fructose on the labels, right? So look for high fructose corn syrup. So they'll say no added sugar, but then there will be fructose, right? So there will be invert sugars or fructose syrup, which will be actually mentioned, honey or fruit concentrates, right? So a lot of even protein powders mention fruit concentrates, right? So they say it's natural, but actually a lot of that is coming from fructose. And of course sucrose, a lot of them clearly mention that we use sucrose, right? That like Enerzal. So remember that will give you 50% fructose. So high fructose culprits are everywhere. They are ubiquitous. You are exposed to this every day. So it's not just in fruit, but it hides in your snacks, in your sauces, in your drinks, and even in the so-called health foods. So what about fruits? We have looked at the artificial ones. Now what about the natural ones, right? So, a lot of people have fruits the whole day because it's a fast. It's an Ekadashi or something like that. So we don't eat supposedly, but we eat fruits, right? So eating fruits, people say, oh, I don't eat breakfast, but I eat like 3 or 4 fruits in the morning, and I'm off breakfast. So is that healthy? You'll soon realize that it perhaps is not the best thing to do, right? So fruits are measured, or foodstuffs are measured in something called the GI index or the glycemic index. So we want to go for fruits which have low glycemic index. So this is an example, a chart which you can take screenshots of and go through. But so guava, apple, pear, orange, strawberry, grapefruits, jamun, plum, cherry, and amla. Some of these you'll realize are not available through the year, right? But then these have low glycemic index. Moderate glycemic index are papaya, mango. Our favorite mango has a moderate GI index, banana, pineapple, kiwi, and grapes. And high GI index, watermelon. Right? People say, oh, this is a lot of water and kuch nahi hota hai. But watermelon is sweet, far sweeter than even mango, right? And it will give you a sugar spike far more than mangoes also. Right? Dates, chiku, sapota is chiku, or jackfruits, and overripe bananas. These are high GI index. Right? So I've actually enumerated the GI index as well, if some of you are interested. So if you see the fruit with the lowest GI index is jamun, but it's available for very short periods of time. Cherries, again available for short periods of time. Strawberries, right? So guava is a good one, right? So you can have maybe an apple or a guava in the morning if you really wish. Maybe jamun is even a better idea, right? Now moderate GI fruits, I've already given you examples. So mango and ripe banana are moderate so they'll give you a moderate spike in your blood sugar levels. And so eat these whole. Do not juice them. We'll see in a couple of minutes why, but do not juice them. Don't have amras. Have but don't juice them, right? Also definitely watch portion sizes. You can't have multiple in a day. And these are some of the high index GI, high glycemic index fruits, and I've just enumerated the GI index, and these are these definitely should be avoided, especially if you're insulin resistant, right? So these will cause blood sugar spikes, right? So especially if you're juicing them, right? So when does fruit become toxic, right? Fruit becomes toxic and high risk of metabolic states, right? So essentially when you're insulin resistant, I've shown you, right? All the fructose gets converted into triglycerides. This is what it shows. Triglycerides, high VLDL, and fatty liver. So what do you do in this state? Stops fruits temporarily. Maybe for 3 or 6 months, take a fruit holiday. Resume only when your triglycerides to HDL ratio falls below 1. Right? This is very important for metabolic control, and we have taken a look at this before, and I'm going to do one more, in-depth lecture on, triglycerides and lipid profiles. So you will get better ideas. The root cause of all of this is insulin resistance, right? Again, if you are not aware of what this is, please watch my previous video on insulin resistance, and now you calculate that. You can reverse that with intermittent fasting, low to very low carb intake, and high protein intake. And we have done a lot of lectures on proteins and how do you calculate that, and how do you do this, right? So fruit can become toxic, especially if you are insulin resistant. So take home message overall for fruits is choose low GI, fiber-rich fruits like guava, berries, apple, and jamun. Right, so guava and apples are pretty much available all the time, right? So these are good ones. Avoid high GI fruits, right? And definitely avoid fruit juices, right? So why am I saying again and again why fruit juice is worse, right? That's because juicing leads to removal of all the fibers. You're pulverizing the whole thing, right? So all the fiber is gone, and there is rapid fructose load, on the liver, right? And very importantly, whole fruit is safer. That's because, it's going to be absorbed slightly slowly because of the fiber, right? And juice, it bypasses all this satiety and it overloads the liver pretty quickly. Also, if you have one apple, right, you will have to chew it for quite a while, right? And then you will be fed up. You won't want to have like 5 or 6 apples back to back. I'll be very surprised with that, right? But 5 or 6 apples will be juiced and you will actually get 1 glass of apple juice. So having 1 glass of apple juice is equivalent to actually eating fructose from 6 apples, but minus the fiber, right? So do not juice fruits. So starting with this back, the question we started with, can diabetics eat mangoes? Maybe once a day. What will it do to my blood glucose levels? Right? Let's take a little deep dive into mangoes. So why blood sugar will rise after eating a mango? That's because this is what the mango has inside. It has sucrose, not just fructose, right? So almost 50% of what the mango has in terms of its sweetness is coming from sucrose, which will get broken down into glucose and fructose. It also has direct amount of glucose, almost 25 to 30%. And it then rest is fructose, right? So like I am showing here, glucose is going to get broken down into sucrose is going to get broken down into glucose and fructose. These are the actual numbers. 100 gram mango pulp. This is, you can say, thick amras, right? So 13 grams of total sugar in that, out of which 6 grams is sucrose, which will give you 3 grams of glucose and 3 grams of fructose. And then you have all of this. So overall, you will get 6 grams of glucose in total, which is quite a lot. It will raise your blood glucose levels by at least 10 to 15% from baseline. Remember, the rest, that is 6 grams of fructose, is going to cause fatty liver and raise triglyceride levels significantly. Right? So next time when you see your lipid profile and you see you have high triglycerides and you have high LDL levels, perhaps what's to blame is eating too much of fructose coming from fruits predominantly, right? So, statins may not have a lot of role in reversing all of this, right? Maybe to a certain extent, but not a lot. And we'll take a more deep dive next lecture, but this is pretty much how it works with mangoes. So, can I eat this or not? What does it depend on? It mainly depends upon your insulin sensitivity status. If you are insulin sensitive, if you're lean, and if you're active, then 1 fruit a day is okay. But if you're insulin resistant and if you're diabetic, then avoid juice at all cost and maybe limit yourself to half a mango or maybe half a fruit. That is good enough, right? And maybe even stop or go off them temporarily for a while. It's, if you're post-exercise, maybe it's better tolerated. Like a ripe banana after an exercise is perhaps good, right? And it's utilized pretty well. Overall, if you're insulin resistant and not yet diabetic, still limit fruits, right? Till your insulin resistance reverses. So, I showed you these responses in the beginning. I hope that the 35% who actually said that they have at least 1 fruit a day, maybe more in mangoes, are aware of their insulin resistance and sensitivity patterns, and also, are watching their triglyceride levels, their uric acid levels, and all of the other things that I have explained to you. So the take-home messages from all of this fructose metabolism is that fructose is not inherently harmful if you are insulin sensitive. But if you are insulin resistant, fructose becomes lipogenic and is extremely toxic. Avoid added fructose from all the foodstuffs that we discussed. Definitely avoid juices, especially artificial juices, and sweet rehydration drinks that we've already seen examples with. And test for your metabolic health. Look at your HOMA-IR ratio, your fasting triglycerides, and get your liver ultrasound done to see if you have any sort of fatty liver, especially if you are having raised SGOT and SGPT liver enzyme levels, which will say that you are perhaps going towards liver dysfunction. Next time, we'll look at lipid profile and statins in health and disease, and I'll give you my take on what I feel about extensive use of statins, and I won't say more, but please stay tuned for that. That brings us to the end of this lecture on fructose metabolism. So we have looked at, or we've explored the relationship between fructose, fruits, and fatty liver. Who knew eating too much fruits could lead to triglyceride levels and fatty liver, right? So stay informed and make the right choices. And I hope to see you very soon in some of the upcoming videos. Thank you so much for tuning in.